There are many roller coasters out there that get very bad reputations. People, before even riding them, will just assume they're not good attractions. I have a list of 10 rides that I think I went into with the mindset of being bad rides, but actually came off of them quite enjoying them. At number 10, I have Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland, and in no way does anyone ever call this a bad ride. However, it is pretty much assumed by most of the community, even people that haven't ridden it, that this is the weakest Giga coaster out there. And it really isn't. I actually have it above Millennium Force, and for a while, I had it above Intimidator 305. So I don't think it's fair to say this is a bad ride. It had some pretty good airtime moments. It's full of great speed. The first drop is fantastic, and I really do enjoy this ride quite a bit. At number 9, I have Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England, and this is a ride that there's very polar opposite opinions on. A lot of people love this ride, but there is a good amount of people that also think it is a terrible ride and that people won't even re-ride it. And that's because people say the restraints are very bad on it. And while I will agree that the restraints are not good, I don't think they ruin the ride experience to the extent that some people say they do. It's a good attraction. It has a good layout. It has some good airtime moments. The restraints aren't great, but I really came off this ride surprised, and I really was not looking forward to riding it, honestly. I had heard so many awful and negative things about the restraints and how they completely ruined the ride, and I've ridden Skyrush, and I kind of agreed with that. So for Superman the Ride, I was hoping that this wouldn't be another Skyrush, and it really wasn't. I really enjoyed it. At number 8, I have Intimidator at Carowinds, which is a B&M hypercoaster that's often called Intimidator. You know, a lot of people think you don't get any good airtime on this attraction, and you do. It has some very good airtime moments, and I was honestly very surprised by that. I've ridden this roller coaster many times, many different years. I've been to Carowinds every year since 2016, so I've ridden it about 4 different occasions, 4 different times throughout different seasons. I've been during the fall, during the summer. So I've gotten plenty of rides on this attraction, and I will admit that sometimes I've gotten some poor rides on it, but majority of the time it is still a very good hypercoaster that gets this negative shadow overcast on it, obviously because there's Fury in the same park, but it's definitely not a bad roller coaster, which I think Intimidator kind of makes you think that this ride is going to really do nothing except have trim brakes, and it's not really going to have much airtime or anything like that. However, I've actually gotten some very solid airtime on this ride, and I think that it gets overlooked with Fury right next to it. At number 7, I have Rugaru at Cedar Point. A lot of people hate this attraction. They say it's rough. They say it's not good. They say that Mantis was much better. I never rode Mantis, so I can't say that. But Rugaru, for a long time, was one of my favorite floorless coasters. I actually got a very back row night ride on it once, and that was one of the best ride experiences I've ever had on a coaster. That was a fantastic ride. I really enjoyed Rugaru, and I just don't understand where people call it rough or why it gets so much hate that it does. Now we're starting to get into the attractions that I think actually do get very bad reputations for being awful coasters, and I think are actually very good coasters. At number 6, I have Wildcat at Hershey Park. This is a ride that many people think you should just throw away an arm and see it right now. However, I thought it was a fantastic ride. I really, really enjoyed the attraction. It surprised me quite a bit. A lot of people were saying it's rough, and I'm not going to say it's a smooth coaster, but it's definitely, jackhammering that you can bear. It's nothing terrible. I rode it in the middle and actually in the back, and I thought it was a pretty good ride and actually quite enjoyed it. At number 5, it's Roar at Six Flags America. Very similar to Wildcat. People call it rough. It was one of the very first GCI coasters. And while it is not, obviously, again, not butter smooth, I don't find it to be that rough, and I actually quite enjoy the ride. When I rode it, I actually marathoned it for a while I was at Six Flags America, so not a bad attraction. Number 4 is Twister at Knoebels, and this is a ride that I honestly I didn't know what to think. I went to Knoebels. I'm thinking Phoenix is going to be a big coaster here. Impulse will probably be good flying turns, and I'm like, but I've heard some bad things about Twister. What if that's not good? And I loved it. It actually cracked, if you watched my top 10 wooden coaster videos, it cracked my top 10 wooden coasters. I loved this attraction. I thought it was very good, and I was very, very happily surprised. At number 3, I have Time Warp at Canada's Wonderland. This is a ride that a lot of you, I know a majority of you probably dislike quite a bit. I love it. I don't know. I rode it the first time, and I thought, wow, that's terrible, like many of you probably did. But then my cousin was like, no, I enjoyed it. I think you should have to stick your head out a little bit more, and you won't get the, the head banging. And I did that, and I rode it like 3 or 4 times, which looking back on it wasn't the best decision. I probably should have had some time for more rides on Leviathan or Behemoth. But at the time, I was like, yeah, let's ride it again. And I liked it a lot, honestly. I thought it was a very fun ride. Not one of my favorite roller coasters of all time or anything like that. Probably not even in my top 50 to 100, but it's still a fun ride. I actually quite enjoyed it. So I know it gets a lot of hate. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but Time Warp at Canada's Wonderland, in my book, is a ride that gets a very bad reputation, but was actually a pretty great ride. At number 2, we have Grizzly at King's Dominion. This is a highlight definition of a bad reputation. So many people tell me, James, how can you like Grizzly so much? It's so rough. It's so boring. It's honestly, it's not. It's none of those things either. I don't think it's that rough. I think there's one moment in the ride where you can call it rough, and that's where you're coming out of the tunnel, you bank to the right, you do a half a helix, and then you kind of go towards the straight track and kind of banks a little bit, and you might, sometimes if you don't know how to ride, you will kind of bank and you'll get thrown to your side, and that will hurt a little bit. But other than that, this ride isn't that rough. Yes, there's jackhammering, but I would not call it rough. There is a lot of moments where you're getting head banging or, shoulder banging or anything like that, other than that one moment I just listed off. And I also, people say it's boring, and I'm like, man, this ride, especially at night, is the exact opposite of boring. It's fast paced. It is actually some moments of airtime. The drop is great. I don't know. I don't find it boring or rough at all. So it's definitely one of my favorite rides at King's Dominion, and one of my favorite in Virginia, honestly. It's one of my favorites. And the number one coaster that gets a bad reputation, however, produces one of the best ride experiences that I love this ride. It's actually in my top 50 coasters, is Nighthawk at Carowinds. I know that's a bold claim. A lot of you will dislike Nighthawk. This is the Vekoma Flying Dutchman coaster at Carowinds. And I don't know what to say, guys. I have ridden this. Like I said, I've been at Carowinds 4 times, and every time I go to Carowinds, I ride it, and I continue to ride it. I've ridden it in the back, I've ridden it in the front, I've ridden it in the middle, I've ridden it in the middle seats, I've ridden it on the wing seats, wherever the outer seats, everything like that. I've never gotten a bad ride on this thing. I like it quite a bit. I think it's a fun attraction. I don't know what it is, guys. I don't know what it is. I also have ridden Firehawk, and I've also ridden Batwing, and I like those too. So all the Vekoma Flying Dutchman coasters are hits in my book. So that is the number one that I ride, because I know so many people that hate that attraction and think it's rough and think it's nothing to write home about. But I actually think the complete opposite of that. It's one of my favorite at Carowinds, and like I said, it's actually not. I think I said top 50 steel coasters. I don't think it's top 50 steel coasters, but I think it is top 75, honestly. Which out of 236 roller coasters which I've ridden, that's a pretty manageable, pretty good spot to be at. So Nighthawk at Carowinds is my number one. I loved all those attractions I just listed off, and I think all of them get bad reputations. But what rides have you ridden that you think get bad reputations? And if any of the ones I listed off you disagree with me, let me know. We can have a little bit of a discussion in the comments. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.